They called me the barista and pushed me off their yacht. His father laughed, his mother sneered. My boyfriend said nothing. None of them knew I already owned everything they had left. The martini hit me at 2:17 p.m., cold, gin forward, expensive in the way that things are expensive when the person spending the money has never had to earn it themselves. It caught me across the chest, ran down the front of my pale linen dress, and pooled, slowly and deliberately, inside my left sandal. Victoria Richardson, Liam's mother, a woman who had spent 6 decades perfecting the art of cruelty dressed as carelessness, lowered her crystal glass and looked at the mess she'd made of me. Oops, she said. Her friends laughed, the kind of laugh that doesn't have any joy in it, just recognition. Yes, that's right. That's exactly what she deserves. I stood on the teak deck of the Sovereign Lady, a 70-foot motor yacht currently moored in Harborview Marina, currently leased through a financial instrument that I had spent the last 6 weeks quietly, methodically dismantling, and I felt the gin dripping off my elbow and I did not move. I looked at Liam. He was 4 feet away in a teak chair with an imported beer sweating in his hand and a pair of mirrored aviators covering his eyes. He had seen everything. He had seen his mother raise the glass. He had watched her turn toward me with that specific, premeditated quality that people mistake for spontaneity when they don't want to acknowledge what they're actually watching. He turned toward the harbor. Just turned. Away. That moment, that 4-foot distance, those mirrored lenses, that deliberate rotation of his jaw toward open water, told me everything I needed to know about 8 months of my life, all at once, the way a fire alarm tells you everything you need to know about a building. I reached into my bag. I opened the Vantage Capital portal, and I pressed the red authorization button, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you who I was to these people, and then I'll tell you who I actually was. Because those are 2 very different stories, and the distance between them is what makes this worth telling. My name is Nora Voss. I'm 29 years old. When Liam Richardson met me 18 months ago, I was working the morning shift at Rowan Street Coffee, a narrow, warm-lit espresso bar on the corner of Rowan and 5th, where the construction workers came in at 5:45 and the nurses came in at 6:30. And everybody said these because they meant it and left dollar tips because they remembered what it was like to need them. I liked working there 2 mornings a week. I liked the smell of it. I liked the specific competence of pulling a good shot, the way it required your full attention for exactly 30 seconds and then was done and someone was grateful. I'd started doing it when I first moved to the city 4 years ago, when I was 25 and newly arrived and building something I wasn't ready to tell anyone about. It was grounding. It kept me honest. It reminded me where I'd come from, which was a small apartment in a medium city with parents who worked hard and a scholarship I'd earned and a business school professor named Dr. Carol Akins, who had looked at my thesis on distressed asset acquisition strategy and said quietly, "This isn't just good, Nora, this is fundable." She was right. Vantage Capital was mine. Not inherited, not gifted, not the product of a family network or a lucky contact or a name that opened doors. I had built it at 25 with a seed round I'd pitched to 11 investors before the 12th said yes, and then I had grown it, quietly and methodically, the way you grow anything that you intend to last. By the time I met Liam, Vantage managed $340 million in distressed assets, had a staff of 23, and occupied the 17th floor of the Meridian building, which was, incidentally, 4 blocks from Rowan Street Coffee. I hadn't told Liam any of this, not because I was hiding it exactly, more because, and this is something Dr. Patricia Wells, the therapist I'd been seeing for 2 years, had helped me understand. I had a deeply ingrained habit of waiting to see who people were before I told them who I was. A defensive mechanism, she called it. Adaptive for a while, then limiting. You're protecting yourself from being used, she said, but you're also preventing yourself from being truly known. I was working on it. But with Liam, the caution had been useful, because Liam had told his parents I was a barista. Just that. Not, she also runs a private equity firm. Not, she owns the building we just drove past. Just barista. And then he'd let them fill in the rest. And they had filled it in with everything they believed about people who served coffee for a living, which was not very much. Richard Richardson, Liam's father, 62, third-generation wealth, a man with the specific confidence of someone who has never had to be interesting, shook my hand with 2 fingers the first time we met. 2 fingers, the way you'd pick up something you weren't sure was clean. "Still doing the coffee thing?" he said. He looked away before I could answer. Victoria was more deliberate. Victoria introduced me to her friends as Liam's little barista friend, always with that particular architecture of words, the little doing a specific kind of violence that required no raised voice. She asked me, at a dinner I hadn't wanted to attend, whether I planned to go back to school someday. She said someday the way you'd say it to a teenager. She once left a brochure for a hospitality management certificate program on the chair where my coat was sitting. Liam's solution every time was the same. Just ignore her. Just ignore him. They're old-fashioned. They don't mean anything by it. 8 months of being ignored by him while his family sharpened their teeth on me. I told myself for a while that he was conflict-averse, that this was a character flaw, not a moral one, that I could love him around it. I'd had this conversation with Dr. Wells more times than I could count, sitting in her office on Thursday evenings, turning the question over like something with an edge. "He's not cruel," I said once. "No," she said, "but he watches cruelty happen and calls it not his business." "What do you call that?" I didn't have a good answer. I told myself I was still looking for one. The file landed on my desk at 7:40 on a Monday morning, 6 weeks before the yacht party. I was on my second coffee and my first problem of the day, a refinancing issue on a hotel property in Phoenix, when my acquisitions coordinator, James Park, knocked on the glass door of my office with the particular energy he had when something was either very good or very bad. "Hawthorne Leisure Holdings," he said, setting the file on my desk. "Flat Flagged overnight by our bank feed. Distressed asset profile. I think you'll want to look at the collateral schedule. I looked. Hawthorne Leisure Holdings was a mid-sized leisure company, a portfolio of coastal properties, 2 event venues, and a marina operation in Harborview. It had been bleeding cash for 14 months, steadily and specifically, in the way that companies bleed when the people running them are more focused on lifestyle than operations. 3 missed payments on its primary debt facility, 2 formal notices ignored, a floating rate balloon structure that had reset unfavorably in the spring and was now pressing down on the company's cash flow like a thumb on a bruise. The collateral schedule was where it got interesting. The physical assets put up against the debt included a summer estate on Narragansett Bay, a 17-room property currently mortgaged to the ceiling through a subsidiary, and listed second, a 70-foot motor yacht leased through something called Sovereign Trust. The guarantor on the personal guarantee line, Richard James Richardson. I read it twice. Then I put the file face down on my desk, and I sat very still for a moment, looking at the harbor through my office window, and I felt something move through me that was not quite conflict and not quite clarity, but was somewhere between the two, in the cold, precise territory where I did my best thinking. I called James back in. Pull every document, I said. Payment records, maritime liens, collateral schedules, all of the noticed correspondence with timestamps. I want chain of custody on every communication. What's the priority level? Highest. He looked at me for a beat. Do you know this borrower? Pull the documents, I said. He pulled them. What they showed me over the following 3 days was a picture of a company being run by a man who had never truly understood the difference between wealth and liquidity, who had borrowed at the peak and spent through the correction, and was now sitting on a pile of assets worth considerably less than the debt attached to them. The personal guarantees were real and enforceable. The missed payment notices had been served correctly. The legal basis for acquisition was, in the opinion of our outside counsel, Marcus Del Rey, J.D., who had 20 years in asset-backed lending and a reputation for conservative analysis, airtight. If you move on this, Marcus said, in his direct and expressionless way, the Richardson family will lose the estate, the yacht, and the marina holdings. The personal guarantee exposure on Richard Richardson specifically is approximately $4.2 million. Is there a defense? A good lawyer could slow it by 90 days, maybe 120, but the underlying default is clean. There's no substantive defense. I thought about Liam turning toward the harbor. How long to close? 6 weeks if you move today. I moved today. I didn't tell Liam about the file. I want to be clear about that choice because it matters. I could have said, I need to tell you something about your family's financial situation and about mine, and had the conversation that I had been avoiding for 8 months, and maybe it would have changed something. Maybe he would have surprised me, but I had watched him for 8 months choose comfort over conscience every single time his family came at me. I had watched him decide over and over that keeping the peace with them was worth what it cost me, and I had reached a point, a quiet, specific, non-dramatic point, where I needed to know who he was when there was nothing left to be strategic about. I needed to see him in the moment, unwarned, unscripted, so I kept the file at the office. I let the acquisition proceed, and when Victoria texted the invitation to the charity afternoon on the Sovereign Lady, I said yes. Liam forwarded me the details with one addition. Mom says don't wear anything too plain. You know how she gets. I put on the pale linen dress. I wanted to see who he became when they came for me in public. The Sovereign Lady was moored at the north end of Harborview Marina, which, if you knew what you were looking at, was itself an asset in the Hawthorne Leisure collateral schedule. The marina operation, technically, was bleeding the same cash as everything else, and the berth fees being paid by the Richardson family were being paid to a subsidiary they themselves controlled, which is the kind of financial Ouroboros that looks clever on paper and looks desperate in the documents. I knew all of this. I stepped aboard at 1:45 p.m., looking, as requested, not too plain. Victoria's friends were already 3 drinks deep, the kind of afternoon where nobody eats because nobody wants to acknowledge they'd like to eat, and so everyone gets progressively more themselves in the way that happens when there's nothing between a personality and a glass of something expensive. Richard shook my hand, 2 fingers again, consistent, I'll give him that, and said, Liam said you'd be coming. Good of you to make the trip across town. I was in the neighborhood, I said. He smiled the smile of someone who finds things amusing that aren't jokes and moved away. The first hour was manageable. Victoria's friends asked me questions. What do you do? Where did you go to school? Oh, Columbus State, how interesting. With the specific politeness that is actually a form of cataloging. They were placing me, filing me, deciding where I went in the social taxonomy of this afternoon, and the answer they were arriving at was below. I had done enough deals to recognize due diligence. These women were conducting evaluation. I let them. At some point around 2 p.m., a woman named Diane, blonder than seemed natural, with the tight laugh of someone who has been keeping Victoria entertained for 20 years, said to me with a bright fixed smile, Liam's told us you make wonderful coffee. Do you think you could check if there's anything in the galley? I'm sure the staff would love the help. Liam heard it. He was 3 feet away. He took a sip of his beer. I said, I'm sure they have it covered, and smiled back, and Diane blinked once and turned to say something to Victoria, and I felt my jaw tighten in the specific way it does when I am deciding not to say what I could say. At 2:17, Victoria found me at the rail. I had moved to the starboard side to get some air. The gin fumes and the specific atmospheric pressure of being looked down on by 6 women in expensive linen were combining in a way that required some distance. I was looking at the harbor. I was thinking about a contract provision in the Hawthorne file that Marcus had flagged that morning. I heard Victoria before I felt her. Her glass hit my chest with the specific intention that people perform as accident. The gin, good gin, I'll say that for the Richardsons, they did not cheap out on the gin, went everywhere. cold, then immediate. Down my dress, down my legs, into my sandals. Oops, she said. Her friends laughed. I turned to look at Liam. He was watching. He had seen it happen. His face was the face of a man who is making a very rapid calculation about what acknowledging something will cost him, and arriving at an answer he can live with. He turned toward the harbor. Just ignore it. I could hear him deciding. She didn't mean it. They're a lot, but they don't mean anything by it. I stood there with gin in my sandals, and I felt something close in me. Not dramatically, not with noise, just closed, like a valve. Like the last line of a position you've been holding too long. I was done. What happened next happened fast, and I want to pace it carefully because the order of events matters. At 2:19, I reached into my bag and opened the Vantage Capital Operations portal on my phone. The secure interface that my COO, Elena Marquez, and I had built specifically for authorizing sensitive actions remotely. At the top of the dashboard, in green text, was the notification that had come through at 9:14 that morning. Hawthorne Leisure Holdings. Acquisition closed. Asset recovery authorization available. Awaiting presidential signature. I had been holding this authorization for 6 hours. I had held it deliberately because I had wanted to see. Now I had seen. At 2:19 and 43 seconds, I pressed my thumb to the biometric confirmation and authorized full asset recovery proceedings on Hawthorne Leisure Holdings, including the Narragansett Bay Estate, the marina operations, and 170-foot motor yacht currently registered as Sovereign Lady and moored at Harborview Marina, berth 47. The authorization transmitted. I put my phone back in my bag. At 2:21, Victoria's palm hit my shoulder. It was not an accident. Nothing about this woman was an accident. It was a full-palmed shove, the kind that has calibrated force behind it, the kind that knows where the edge is because it has looked. My heel caught a deck cleat. For 1 second, one specific, crystalline, heart-stopping second, there was nothing behind me but open railing and 30 feet of air and dark harbor water. My hand found the rail. Pain exploded through my palm. White, immediate, the kind of pain that empties your lungs in a single moment. I held on. My knuckles went white and my vision tunneled, and I pulled myself back inch by inch until the deck was solid under both feet again. The yacht went silent. Completely, suddenly, the way spaces go silent when something has happened that everyone present knows is serious, and nobody wants to be the one to acknowledge. I straightened up. I turned around. Victoria was looking at me with an expression that was trying to be startled and wasn't quite making it. And then Richard Richardson, Richard, who had been watching from across the deck, who had the specific redness in his face of a man 4 drinks in and entirely comfortable with the behavior of his wife, laughed. Not nervously, not in discomfort. He laughed the way men laugh when women do things they approve of. Don't get the deck wet, sweetheart, he said. Staff stays below. I looked at Liam. He adjusted his sunglasses. Babe, honestly, maybe go downstairs. You're upsetting Mom. That was the exact second. Not a building moment. Not the last straw on a camel's back. An exact, specific surgical second. Like the moment a bone breaks, not the pressure that preceded it. I stopped loving him. No tears, no speech, no scene. A quiet internal click, like a lock engaging. Like closing a position and refusing to lose another cent. At 2:31, the first siren cut across the water. Nobody heard it at first over the jazz quartet on the lower deck. Then the captain's radio crackled with something that made him stand up from his seat, fast, in the way people in uniform stand when the tone of a radio changes. The music died mid-note. Somebody's champagne flute stopped halfway to a mouth. A harbor police launch rounded the starboard side, blue light strobing across the white hull, steady, unhurried, the way authority moves when it is completely certain of what it's doing. The launch pulled alongside with a clean professional nudge, and a junior officer in a harbor patrol jacket stepped forward and secured the line to our cleat. Then she came aboard. Elena Marquez, JD, my COO, my chief legal officer. 12 years in commercial asset recovery before I recruited her away from Meridian Partners with a compensation package and a mission she said she couldn't turn down. She was 41 years old, 5'4", and had the particular quality of someone who has been underestimated enough times to have learned to use it. She wore a navy suit and sensible flat shoes and carried a waterproof document case under one arm, and in the other hand a megaphone she absolutely did not need for a 70-foot deck. She had brought it anyway. Elena did not look at Richard, did not look at Victoria, did not survey the guests or the jazz setup or the sweating champagne buckets. She looked directly at me. Her voice carried across every deck, every guest, every harbor police officer who had come aboard in her wake. 3 of them, harbor unit, professionally blank. Madam President, she said, and her voice was clear and even and exactly loud enough. The foreclosure papers are ready for your signature. Nobody laughed. Richard Richardson's face went completely, suddenly blank. The expression of a man whose entire financial reality has just rearranged itself in a single sentence and who has not yet caught up to what that means. Victoria stepped backward. 1 step, involuntary, the body processing information faster than the mind could. Liam stared at me. He'd taken the sunglasses off. His eyes were the eyes of someone who was looking at a person they thought they knew and realizing, with a specific sick sensation, how completely the image they'd been carrying didn't match what was in front of them. Elena opened the waterproof case. She set the document folder in my hands. Clean, professional, the motion of someone who has done this enough times to make it look like nothing, which made it look like everything. I looked at Richard, then Victoria, then Liam. Your family wanted to know where I belonged on this boat, I said. I uncapped the pen. Apparently, the answer is above the signature line. I signed the first page. Yacht recovery authorization. My name, clean and legible, on the line that transferred physical possession of the Sovereign Lady to Vantage Capital's Asset Recovery Division. Richard made a sound, a strangled, reaching sound, like a man trying to produce an objection and finding finding the mechanism jammed. One of the harbor officers stepped forward, not aggressively, just forward. The way you step forward when someone needs to understand that a conversation has a formal context. Now, the sound stopped. What followed was not dramatic, in the way that the word dramatic implies chaos. It was orderly. Documentation has a way of making things orderly, of converting the loudest possible feelings into paperwork, into procedure, into the clean sequential movement of one thing following another. Elena handed Richard the formal notice of acquisition, 12 pages, color-coded tabs, Marcus Del Rey's firm name on the bottom of each, and explained in the patient, precise tone of someone who enjoys delivering information to people who wish they weren't receiving it, that Vantage Capital had completed its acquisition of Hawthorne Leisure Holdings' outstanding debt facility at 9:14 a.m. that morning, that the personal guarantee had been triggered by 3 consecutive payment failures, and that the asset recovery authorization had been executed at 2:19 p.m. The estate will be assessed next Tuesday, she said. The marina operations transferred at close. The vessel will need to be vacated by 5 p.m. today. You can't. Richard's voice was the voice of a man who has spent 62 years believing that his name was a form of protection, and is discovering suddenly that it isn't. I'll call our counsel. This is Daniel Firth at Harrington and Cross, Elena said pleasantly. He received the formal notice at 9:17 this morning. I believe he's been trying to reach you. Richard's phone had been face down on the deck chair all afternoon. He turned it over. 11 missed calls. Victoria, who had not said a word since her backward step, was doing something I had never seen her do in 8 months of meals and events and gin-soaked afternoons. She was looking at her husband with an expression that was not performance and not charm, and not the practiced carelessness she'd used on me since the day we met. She was frightened, genuinely, privately, in the body-level way that people are frightened when the thing they've been comfortable taking for granted turns out not to be solid. I handed the signed documents back to Elena. What's the timeline on the estate proceedings? I said. Marcus wants to move within 30 days. He'll send the formal correspondence Monday. Fine. Do you want to be present for the estate assessment? I thought about it. No, I said. Send James. Liam found me at the stern at 2:58 while the harbor officers were still aboard, and Elena was walking Richard through the procedural specifics with the particular thoroughness of someone who wants to make sure there is no ambiguity. He looked, and I want to describe this exactly because it matters. He looked not angry, not scheming, not calculating. He looked like a person who has just watched someone they thought they knew walk through a door that turned out to be a completely different room. He looked lost. Nora, he said. I didn't say anything. How long have you? 18 months, I said. Vantage has been operating for 4 years. I've been running it for 4 years. You never told me. No. He stood there. The harbor light was coming in low and gold the way it does in the late afternoon, and under any other circumstances, it would have been beautiful. He looked at me, and he looked for the first time in 8 months, completely unguarded. Why didn't you tell me? I thought about Dr. Wells, about adaptive, then limiting, about the specific waiting I'd done, to see who he was before I showed him who I was. Because I needed to see what you'd do, I said, when they came at me. Without knowing what I was, something moved through his face. Nora, she pushed me off the rail, Liam. He stopped. She put her hand on my shoulder and pushed me, and your father laughed, and you told me to go downstairs. He didn't argue. There was nothing to argue. We both knew what had happened. We had both been there. The only question that had ever existed between us was whether he would acknowledge it. And I could see, watching his face in the harbor light, that he was doing the thing he always did. He was calculating. He was working out what acknowledging it would cost. It would cost him his parents, their money, their approval, the specific comfort of being the child who never made things difficult. And I watched him decide one more time. She didn't mean to. I picked up my bag. You've been telling me that for 8 months, I said. I believed it for 6. I walked to where Elena was finishing with the harbor officers, and I signed the final transfer document, and I stepped from the Sovereign Lady onto the harbor police launch, which was, technically, the first time I had ever departed a vessel I now owned. I didn't look back. 6 weeks later, the estate assessment happened on a Tuesday, the way Elena said it would. James Park led it. The property had been appraised at $3.1 million against debt of $4. $2 million, which left a meaningful shortfall that would pursue Richard Richardson personally through the guarantee mechanism for some number of years. Marcus Del Rey's firm was handling the proceedings with the methodical pleasure of someone who enjoys clean documentation and clear liability. The marina transferred without incident. The slip and berth operations were brought under Hawthorne's restructured holding company, which Vantage was running in recovery mode with a hired operator. Early projections suggested it would be cash flow positive within 18 months. The Sovereign Lady was listed for sale. I did not buy her. I have a principle about yachts that are too big to be fun and too small to be impressive, and the Sovereign Lady was precisely that size. I heard from Liam once, a text, 3 weeks after the harbor. 3 sentences. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I understand now why you didn't tell me. I hope you're okay. I read it on a Thursday morning between my second coffee and my 9 o'clock call with the Phoenix refinancing team. I thought about Dr. Wells and what she would say about the specific quality of an apology that arrives after the consequences do. I thought about what it would mean to respond and what it would mean not to. I set the phone face down and went to my 9 o'clock. Some positions you close and you don't reopen.